Since the Dragon Prince is not coming back for a long time for its 4th season, I have decided to delve into one of the aspects of the show that I do not believe has received nearly as much attention as it deserves: the music. Now, it's perhaps understandable that people don't pay as much attention to it unless they are normalized to studying music, because there are so many other aspects of the show to enjoy: the characters, the writing, the lore, the world, all these really interesting moral conflicts the show brings up. But the music's important. It does a lot to create the sense of atmosphere, the sense of tone that the show really relies on. Without the music, the show would be a lot more arid, a lot more distant, a lot more icy. You wouldn't feel that same warm, palpable emotional connection that you do. There are a lot of scenes where the music reflects what is happening on the screen, which is normal, but the music also enhances what's happening in a lot of really interesting ways. It finds a lot of little nuances and complexities that would not be clear just from the writing and the acting themselves. The score, composed by Frederik Wiedmann, is lush and beautiful, but it's a lot more than that. It conveys meaning and purpose. Let's look at that in the context of a specific scene, that being the scene wherein Rayla and Callum finally start their relationship, after Callum calls Rayla a hero and really valorizes her in that regard, and she, who had only been used to blame and suspicion, is inspired and heartened by that. The piece that plays in the scene is called Because She's Rayla, referencing one of Callum's lines that really makes Rayla realize that she is loved, that she is cared about, that she doesn't have to view all social interactions as antagonistic and innately fraught and tenuous. But before we look further into the score for that scene, let's take a step back and look at the music for the show as a whole. The instrumental palette is, at least at first glance, rather standard for high fantasy. There are percussive elements for more action-centric scenes. There are these mystical and elegant piano melodies, and there are soaring strings to convey real depths of emotion, passions and longings and desires, and also disappointments and despondency. But there are a lot of elements hidden in the score that differentiate it from the likes of Game of Thrones or The Lord of the Rings, even though for the most part, if you swap the musical score into The Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, it would still fit. There are a few recurring motifs that one can latch onto because they become familiar to the ear. There's a lot of talk of how shows or books teach you how to engage with them, but shows and movies can also teach you how to listen to them just as much as any opera or musical. There are these certain pieces of music, these ostinatos that you keep hearing again and again, and you come to, without thinking about it, associate a certain mood or idea or character with them. And since you hear certain motifs so often, they help the whole musical palette of the show feel more coherent. The main theme of the Dragon Prince is worked into a lot of these pieces, sometimes in very obvious ways, sometimes in ways that are more subtle and that you can only pick up if you listen to a piece right after you listen to the main theme. Only when you look at them in direct comparison does it become clear how similar they are and how certain pieces are taken from the main theme. These recurring passages make the whole score feel more organic and more continuous without making it feel too staid and stolid and unsurprising. Instruments that you might not expect to hear that I really love for how they function in the context of the musical score. In an interesting interview with the Dot and Line, Wiedmann talks about how he used medieval lutes and Bolivian wind instruments to make the score feel more otherworldly. It's something that's a bit strange, a bit foreign to the ear, a bit something that you wouldn't necessarily expect even from a fantasy series. It really feels magical. And this is not only because those instruments are from other cultures and time periods that we are not particularly accustomed to engaging with, rather it's because they contrast with the more foundational instruments in the work, such as the strings and the piano. This contrast, more than some sort of innate strangeness, is what makes the music of the show feel as otherworldly as it does. Wiedmann also talks in this interview about the Armenian duduk, an instrument I assure you that you've heard even if you're not particularly familiar with it. It's worked into a lot of pieces that feel more mystical, more strange, more elemental, really conveying a sense of myth and ancient history. I know I just said that the show does not rely on certain instruments sounding innately mysterious, and for the most part that is the case, but the duduk does sound a little mysterious, a little more wispy, a little more diffuse. Every bit of music that comes out takes a little bit longer to completely reverberate. Every note stays with you a little longer. It stays in the air a little longer than you're accustomed to, and takes on all these little interesting nuances in its timbre as the notes dissolve into air. But I must say that the pieces that stand out the most for me personally are the quiet pieces. The harpsichord in Not That Simple is soft and inviting and welcoming, and it provides a nice contrast with the bombastic horns that eventually overtake the piece. One of my favorites is Last Sunset, which is built around a particular and striking piano melody. There isn't a lot of solo piano in the show, so when it does show up, it feels special. It feels intimate, but also a little lonely. It really draws attention to the tense longing of the scene. It provides an extra tinge of solemnity. Now we return to Because She's Rayla, which is not particularly one of the more experimental pieces in the show. It mostly relies on piano and strings, but how those piano and string sections are incorporated in the piece is quite special and interesting. We start with a humble little piano section. Then we soon hear the Rayllum motif. This is not the first time we hear it. It is often associated with the relationship between Rayla and Callum. One of the most notable occurrences of this motif is in the piece called Silver Grove, which depicts connection and intimacy and closeness between Rayla and Callum. If you listen closely, you can hear that this is heavily based off the main theme of the show, but it's also different. The main theme is darker, it's more austere, it's more suspicious. It's not resolved. It's inviting, but in a way that's a little dark, a little ambiguous. You don't quite know how this is going to resolve, which makes it perfect as a main title theme, but the Rayllum theme is a little more uplifting, a little more buoyant and ebullient. It's these two people from different backgrounds who, by the laws and conventions of this society, should not be together, still nonetheless finding connection, finding real love and tenderness with each other. So because the show has taught us as listeners to associate that motif with this relationship, when we hear it again, we know this is a Rayllum scene. But it goes a little deeper than that, because we hear that little piano section, and then it launches into soaring, rushing strings as the two of them come together. They have that kiss, and unlike the kiss in the previous episode, this one actually locks in the relationship. They realize that they should be together, that they're good for each other, that they want to be together. It's a key turning point in this season, and is really important. Using strings for romantic moments is quite common, almost cliché, but I love how it's incorporated into this little piece, because after the string section, we hear a similar piano melody, but this time there's a little more resolution, a little more clarity than when we heard it before the string section, emphasizing how secure the relationship between these two really is. And because Rayllum as a relationship is often used as metonymy for the show's depictions of elves and humans trying to live in peace and stop the warring that has consumed these two races for so long, hearing the Rayllum motif here signifies directly two teenagers moving from icy awkwardness to warmth, tenderness, and intimacy, but it indirectly also signifies the hopes and dreams and yearnings of two peoples trying to find some sort of peace and unity. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can, and you want to see more videos like this. It was nice to be able to go off the beaten path a little bit and talk about an aspect of the show that I don't think has gotten enough attention. I am not a skilled musician, so I'm sorry if my musical analysis didn't go as in-depth as it could have, but I do really love how shows can use little musical motifs that recur and repeat to tell a broader story. You come to associate that motif with more than just some notes, but with ideas, concepts, characters. It's really fascinating how shows can use music like that, and I love pointing it out whenever I see it. So anyway, tune in soon for my next analysis. It will be coming soon. Promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.